We have this tendency to think that for any really tough job, technology's gotta be the answer. I mean, a smarter tool should make the work easier, right? But what if a tool that's designed to help actually makes one of the world's most demanding jobs even harder?
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we first need to step into the incredibly high-pressure world of simultaneous interpreting. And yeah, we're talking about the folks who translate live for world leaders at the UN, those huge international conferences. So take a look. This is their office. And inside these little booths, interpreters are pulling off a mental feat that is it's truly off the charts. It's basically a cognitive high-wire act, but with absolutely no safety net.
So what they're doing in there is called simultaneous interpreting. And it means exactly what it sounds like. They're listening to one language, processing it in their brain, and then speaking the translation in a different language all at the same time. We're talking a delay of just a few seconds. It is just an incredible, incredible display of mental multitasking.
Right, so given how unbelievably intense that job is, the natural thought is, hey, let's give them some tech support. Let's build some kind of digital assistant to make their lives a little easier. And well, that's exactly what happened. These things called computer-assisted interpreting tools, or CAI tools for short, they were developed. The idea behind them is actually really simple. The software listens along with the interpreter and then flashes on-screen suggestions for tricky terms or names or numbers. It's supposed to act like a perfect little digital partner. But here's where the story takes a really fascinating turn. Researchers started to notice a debate bubbling up. People were asking, what if this supposedly helpful tool was actually adding a whole new heavy burden? And that right there is the cognitive overload paradox.
I mean, the promise was crystal clear, right? Technology is supposed to reduce the mental work. But the paradox that these researchers decided to investigate was so compelling. What if adding another screen to watch, another stream of information to manage, what if that actually creates more mental work, not less?
So how do you figure something like that out? I mean, you can't just ask someone, hey, how hard are you thinking right now? You have to actually measure it. So a team of researchers designed this brilliant experiment to, in a way, get inside the interpreter's head and measure that invisible strain.
And the key metric they used is something called the ear-voice span, or EVS. Think of it as the thinking gap. It's that tiny, tiny delay between an interpreter hearing a phrase and then speaking the translation. Now, here's the key. A longer gap means the brain is working harder. It's the perfect clue for measuring cognitive load.
And this wasn't just a lab theory, The research team recruited 15 highly experienced professional interpreters. We're talking the real deal. They put them in a super realistic scenario to test exactly how their performance changed when they were using these new CAI tools.
All right, so the stage was set. The interpreters were tested once without the tool, and then again with the tool. They crunched all the data, and the verdict was, well, let's just say it was pretty shocking.
Okay, let's look at the hard numbers, starting with that thinking gap we talked about, the EVS. We're going to compare the results side by side, with and without the tool.
So working on their own, just relying on their years of training and expertise, the interpreters had an average thinking gap of about 3.5 seconds, okay? So that's our baseline. That's the mark of a pro operating at peak efficiency.
Okay, now look what happens when that helpful tool gets turned on. The average thinking gap balloons to almost 7 seconds. It just about doubled. The very tool that was meant to speed things up and make them more efficient was actually causing a major, major slowdown.
I mean, that puts the scale of the problem into stark relief, doesn't it? A staggering 98% increase in mental delay. So instead of being a helpful co-pilot, the technology was basically slamming the brakes on their cognitive engine.
Okay, so the numbers don't lie. But you know what? Neither do the people doing the work. The interpreters also filled out a standard workload assessment. Now in this chart, just look at the difference. The blue is without the tool, the red is with it. Check out the bars for mental demand and frustration. They absolutely skyrocketed. When all their personal feedback was tallied up, it showed a 34% overall increase in what they perceived as their cognitive load. So you see, they didn't just perform slower, they actually felt way more strained, more stressed out, and frankly, more frustrated by the whole experience.
So what on earth is going on here? Why did a tool with such a clear, helpful purpose fail so spectacularly? Well, the answer gets right to the very core of how our brains work, especially how they work with technology.
It really boils down to two things. First, divided attention. Think about it. An interpreter's brain has to be completely immersed in the audio they're hearing. This tool forced them to split that precious focus between listening and watching a screen. And second, there's a huge mental cost to switching tasks. Constantly having to dart your attention from listening to thinking to glancing at a screen and then back again, it's just plain mentally exhausting.
And this quote from the research just absolutely nails it. The technology didn't become a seamless extension of the interpreter. Instead, it became a second job. All of a sudden, they were forced to be both an interpreter and a software manager, all at the same time, in real time.
So at the end of the day, this isn't really a story about bad technology. It's a story about bad integration. And it leaves all of us with a really critical question for our future, right? A future that's going to be filled with AI and smart assistants everywhere. And the question is this: how do we design technology that truly helps us think instead of just giving us more to think about?